In May 1984, a helicopter landed in the centre circle of a football pitch in the north of England. A man walked out to it in his full kit, still muddy, and knelt to the crowd behind the goal. Then he got in and flew away, and 36,000 people stood in the rain and cried. He was 33, he was retiring, and he had spent the previous 2 years playing in England's second division. 6 years before that, the same man had been voted the best footballer in Europe. And then he had been voted the best footballer in Europe again. His name was Kevin Keegan, a man in enormous headphones, jabbing a finger at the camera and appearing to fall apart on live television while Alex Ferguson's Manchester United took a title off of him. That clip has been a punchline for 30 years. And the 8 seconds everybody laughs at happened on a night his team won, not lost, won. That clip makes sense at the end of a very specific 25 years. Which start with a boy that 2 football clubs sent home for being too small. He was born in a mining village near Doncaster in 1951, and his father went down the pits every day for a living. Kevin went for trial at Coventry City. They told him he was too small. He went for a trial at Doncaster Rovers, a club which was playing in the 4th division. They gave him the wrong time and the wrong ground, and he turned up to an empty pitch. He ended up at Scunthorpe United, also in the 4th division. And after training finished, he carried weights up and down the concrete steps of the empty stand until he was strong enough to survive being kicked. In 1971, a scout from Liverpool sat in that empty stand and watched him. Liverpool were run by Bill Shankly. He'd taken over a broken 2nd division club and turned it into the best team in England. Shankly paid £33,000 for the boy from the 4th division. Shankly's entire team talk to him was this: go out and drop some hand grenades. 12 minutes into his first game, he scored. The Liverpool Echo the next morning called him the new king of Anfield. And then he did the thing nobody has ever really explained. 6 years at Liverpool, 3 league titles, the European Cup, the biggest prize in club football, now called the Champions League. 26 years old, the best team on the continent. And he'd already told them a year in advance that the moment they won it, he was leaving. Not for a bigger club. In 1977, there wasn't one. Watch what he does with every choice from here, because it's the same choice every time. Given the safe option and the exposed one, Kevin Keegan took the exposed one every job, every transfer, every microphone. Each time. It made people love him, but it also meant that he had no protection at all when things went wrong. He then signed for Hamburg in West Germany. Keegan left the champions of Europe for a team that had won nothing in a country where he couldn't even speak to his own teammates. Some of his new teammates resented the fee. Some resented the attention. And on the pitch, they stopped passing him the ball. He just ran for 90 minutes a week waiting for a pass that never came. Then, during the German winter break, at a meaningless friendly with a small local club called Lübeck, a defender called Erhard Preuss was marking him. First minute, Preuss put an elbow in his face. A minute later, Keegan made a run without the ball and Preuss took his legs anyway. 4 fouls in 6 minutes in a game that didn't count, on top of 4 months of being frozen out by his own side. And Kevin Keegan turned around and knocked Erhard Preuss unconscious. He didn't wait to be sent off. He walked straight off the pitch and went straight home. 8-week ban. 4 months into Germany, the most expensive player had punched someone in the face in a friendly, and his career there was finished. Then his phone rang, and it was Shankly calling from Liverpool. Did you hit him properly, son? Was it a left or a right? Did he stay down till the count of 10? Keegan had been waiting for someone to tell him he disgraced himself. Instead, the most respected man in English football was on the other end of the line, laughing and telling him to stay and see it through. So he stayed. He had 8 weeks and nothing to fill them with. So he learned German. Then he started turning up to team nights out he wasn't even invited to and asking the players about their wives and children in a language he was still building, until the group had to make room for him. The next season, Hamburg won the Bundesliga for the first time in 19 years with Kevin Keegan at the center of it. In 1978 and again in 1979, he was voted the best footballer in Europe. Coventry City had sent this boy home for being too small. Twice now, he was the best player on the continent, which makes what he did in 1980 completely mad. He came home to Southampton, whose entire modern history was one afternoon in 1976 when they won the FA Cup while beating Manchester United in the final as a second division team. And in his second year there, at 31, he was voted the best player in England. So hold that. The best player in England in the summer of 1982. Because to understand where he went next and why it made a city cry, you need to understand what had happened to that city. Newcastle sits in the far northeast of England, and until the 1970s, it built ships and dug coal. Then the yards closed and the pits closed, and by the early 80s, it had some of the worst unemployment in the entire country and a real sense that London had stopped thinking about it. What Newcastle had left was a football club, Newcastle United. Enormous stadium, enormous crowds, and nothing to show for it since 1927. By 1982, they were in the second division and going nowhere. And 30,000 people were still turning up to watch it because it was the one thing in the city that was still theirs. That summer, the best player in England signed for them, not for the money. He took a pay cut. His father, the miner, he had been a Geordie, a Newcastle man, from the same pits until he moved south for work. Keegan scored on his debut, then ran at the fence, separating the pitch from the supporters, and threw himself into it. I wanted to show them I was one of them, he said. A region that had spent a decade being told it was finished had the best player in England choosing to be there. He got them promoted back to the top flight in 2 years and scored 27 goals while doing it. And then at 33, retired rather than hang on and get slowly worse in front of people who loved him, which is the night you've already seen. And as the helicopter lifted, the scoreboard flashed 3 words in German: goodbye, in the language of the country he'd conquered. Down on the touchline that night in a tracksuit was a local boy, 13 years old, working as a ball boy, Alan Shearer. He'd remember it for the rest of his life. 8 years later, Newcastle United nearly died. In 1992, Newcastle United was second from bottom in the second division, deep in debt, and one place away from dropping down into the third tier for the first time in their 100-year history. The new chairman, Sir John Hall, told Kevin Keegan plainly, "If we go down, this football club does not survive it." Keegan took the manager's job with 14 games of the season left, having never managed anybody in his life. They stayed up on the last day of the season. 4 years after that, Newcastle United were at the top of English football, playing the best football in the country. Newcastle in 1995 played football that made no defensive sense whatsoever, and the whole country watched them just because of that. And in 1996, Keegan signed Alan Shearer, Newcastle's own. The ball boy came home to play for the man on the helicopter. By January 1996, they were 12 points clear at the top, having played the same number of games as everybody else. Keegan's own centre-back went up to him and asked seriously whether they might sign a defender. They didn't. Keegan's view was that the people paying to get in had worked all week and were owed something worth watching. That's the club Keegan built. Here's how it broke. Behind them were Manchester United, the champions, managed by Alex Ferguson. His team won 13 of their last 15 games, and Newcastle started losing. Keegan spent the last minutes of a defeat at Liverpool slumped over the advertising boards at the side of the pitch, unable to watch. 3 games left, and Ferguson gave a press conference. Everyone outside Manchester wanted Newcastle United to win. They were the neutrals team, the romantic story, and Manchester United were the machine that kept winning. So Ferguson said it out loud. Other teams saved their best for us, because beating us is the highlight of their season. They won't do that against Newcastle. They'd be happy enough to lose to Keegan. He was accusing professionals of not trying, which in this sport is close to the worst thing you can say. One of the teams he named was Nottingham Forest, who Newcastle were playing next and whose captain was Stuart Pearce, a man who had missed a penalty for his country and had spent the rest of his career visibly carrying it. Ferguson had just suggested that Stuart Pearce wouldn't bother. 3 days later, Newcastle went to Leeds and won 1-0. And afterwards, still in his coat, Kevin Keegan put on a pair of television headphones. The interviewer put it to Keegan that Ferguson's comments were just mind games, part of the sport.
When you do that with footballers, like he said about Leeds, and when you do things like that about a man like Stuart Pearce, I've kept really quiet, but I'll tell you something. He went down in my estimation when he said that. We have not resorted to that, but I'll tell you, you can tell him now if you're watching it, we're still fighting for this title, and he's got to go to Middlesbrough and get something. And I'll tell you, honestly, I will love it if we beat them. Love it.
In 1996, managers did not do this. You gave the interview, gave nothing away, and kept whatever you really thought for the dressing room. Nobody had seen a manager stop performing on live television before. It went around the country in a day, and it never stopped. Love it, outlived the season it came from, and it turned Kevin Keegan into a man who lost his mind on TV. He hadn't, and he wasn't defending himself or his players or even his club. He was defending Leeds, who had spent the previous 90 minutes trying to beat them, and Nottingham Forest, who they were playing 3 days later. Opponents. men with nothing to gain whatsoever from his protection. He was told live on television that this was just part of the game, and Kevin Keegan could not pretend that it was. Newcastle drew their last two matches and finished 4 points behind. 4 years later, he was managing England, the national team, and they lost at home to Germany. Afterwards, he pulled an official into a toilet cubicle to get away from the press, and inside it, he resigned. I'm not up to it, he said. I can't get that extra bit out of these players. Keegan, he stood in a toilet and blamed himself, and then walked away from the biggest job in English football and never asked for it back. In 2008, Newcastle brought him back for a third time under new owners who promised him control of which players the club signed. They sold his best young player against his wishes. Then they told him to sign a player he'd never watched as a favor to two agents. When he asked to see something on the player, they told him to look him up on YouTube. He refused. They signed him anyway. So Keegan resigned and took his own football club to court. He won, and the club was forced to admit on the record that it had deliberately misled its own supporters. Given the safe option and the exposed one, he took the exposed one. He always did. In January this year, his family announced that Kevin Keegan had cancer. He died on the 20th of July. Liverpool posted a tribute. So did Hamburg and Southampton and Newcastle. Kevin Keegan, he took a pay cut to play for a second division club because of where his father was born. He went to court against his own club because they'd lied to the supporters. None of that is the behavior of a man doing a job, and it's the whole of those 8 seconds. He never learned to hold any of it back, and it cost him a league title, the England job, and his career in management. It's also why, when he died on Monday, people in 4 cities felt like they lost someone they knew, because they had. He'd never kept any of it from them. Football fell in love with Kevin Keegan because he was the only one who couldn't pretend that it was just football.